join, give a little bit more time, and then we'll get started.
Yeah.
Phil, you give the call whenever you think it's right. Let's
I
write.
think I'm good to go. Guys, are you ready to go here, you think? Awesome.
Sure, why not?
Yeah, perfect. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. Obviously, we're here with the Smart Traffic webinar in collaboration with the ABC Partner Program with Alejandro, who's on the call. And we're also joined by two of our guests, Adam Lundquist and Nicholas Scalise, as you'll see here as well, for the Smart Traffic webinar. Right, Adam Lundquist, who is the founder of Nerds Do It Better, and Nicholas Scalise, the founder of Growth Marketer, along with myself, Phil Lello, launch specialist here at Unbounce. What we'll be going over today, obviously, what is smart traffic? That's what we signed up for in the webinar. We're going to learn how smart traffic differs specifically from A/B testing and the benefits that come from using smart traffic. We'll also go through a quick little demo of how to use smart traffic variants, how to set them up in your Unbounce account. And we'll also go through Behaviour Sets, which is our new reporting tool that we released as part of the package with smart traffic. And finally, I'm going to pass it over after that to Adam and Nicholas. We're going to be speaking more specifically to different testing strategies and the tactical implementation of these strategies for your variant specific initiatives. Just before we get started, when it comes to questions, feel free to ask away, throw them in the chat. I'll be keeping an eye on them, as will our attendees and Ali as well. You can feel free to raise your hand, or you can just use the Q&A tool that exists within the Zoom chat here at the bottom. We'll also have time at the end, as I mentioned, as well, for a Q&A section. So if you'd rather wait to the end, we can definitely do that and make it more discussionary. But especially as I'm talking to the specifics of how to use smart traffic, I want to make sure that everyone's kind of crystal clear on how to use it. And if you have questions, feel free to jump right in. So let's get started. So what is smart traffic? I want us to think of smart traffic as a different way of using variants for landing pages and more of a conversion enhancement idea as opposed to standard A/B testing. Now, what do I mean by that? A/B testing normally includes one variant, such as a headline, right? Where we have two different landing page variants with the two different headlines that we have. We begin to run traffic to that landing page, and then we see which of the two variants convert better, right? So let's say our variant A converts at 70% and our variant B converts at 30%. Naturally, we're going to assume that variant A works better for a majority of our population and use that B variant, right? But when we do that, what we're doing is neglecting the 30% that converted on our B variant, right? So how do we create a tool that essentially enables us to be able to work with both segments of our population, right? And that's where smart traffic comes in, right? So smart traffic enhances conversion rates because at every time that a new unique visitor comes to your landing page, smart traffic does three things. One, it identifies some common attributes and behaviors from previous visitors, and we'll go over what those variables are in a second. Right? And then goes on and decides based on that data, which is the landing page they're most likely to convert on and sends them there, right? And finally, it continuously optimizes your campaigns using machine learning. Because whether I go to that landing page and I convert or I don't, it's considered a win for smart traffic because they have a new data point to be able to kind of pull them towards, optimization and identifying specific trends, right? And because of this standard or this more targeted approach and segmentation based on your traffic volumes, right? We see smart traffic customers receive a 30% increase in their conversion rates when compared against a standard 50-50 A/B test, right? So in terms of these 5 variables that I spoke to, right, we've tested much more than these 5 that you see here. But these are the 5 that we saw that led to the biggest difference in conversion or deviation, right? Obviously, there's tons of different ones we could have looked at, but these are the top 5 that we noticed led to the most use cases to determine if it was a conversion or not, right? So number one, like the first 2 that we see are more geographically focused, right? So we could look at, boundary lines in terms of the country or region. And when we say region, it could be at the state level or the city level. Also including the time zone, which I know might not seem necessarily like a, there would be a bit more overlap with the country. But if you think about it, right, we think about the East Coast of the United States, that could be a large chunk of our population that work in that way, right? It could also be, if we think about Europe, right, there's a lot of different countries within Europe that are under the same time zone and different ones. If you think about the UK versus Central European time zones, right? And then finally, too, we also think about it from more of a technological, behavior, like kind of how customers interact with their landing page, right? So that would be like our operating system. We have also, so things like iOS, Android, Mac OS, Windows, things like that. Device, so mobile and desktop. And then also we have our browser type, right? So if we're viewing it, whether it's on our mobile device or on our desktop, what's the browser that we're using once we click into our landing page, right? So these are the top 5 that we see, but as you'll notice too, we don't just look at trends on these individually, right? We can see them kind of interact with one another or overlap between 2 different ones, right? So for example, we could see the splits between our mobile and our desktop, and specifically to the mobile side of things, we could also from there see if there's a difference between on a mobile side, if there's a difference between Android and iOS customers, right? We can kind of see that level deeper. We could also see just, more broadly iOS customers, in different countries or in different geographies, right? So that's something that we can kind of look at too, as well. I don't see any questions up in the chat so far, so I'll keep moving, but if you have any questions, just feel free to pop them in. Especially around this, machine learning specific component, because I know it's a big thing for people. And then next, just how does smart traffic differ specifically from A/B testing, right? So we see that there's a lot of benefits in using smart traffic, to I mentioned, because of this, more targeted and segmented approach, right? It allows you to test multiple different variables. So you don't have to pick just one headline that works. Right, you can just change the entire messaging of what your landing page says, right? All of your copy can change. It can be in a different tone of voice, right? Maybe your hero image relates differently to a different tone of voice, and so you want to change the hero image as well as the copy on your page, right? You can test all of these different things using smart traffic. On top of that, too, in conjunction, you don't have to necessarily just use 2 different variants, right? You can use multiple different variants that say multiple different things, right? Or segment for different specific industries, right? Or sort of geographies or whatever it may be, right? And so because of that, you could have what we recommend in that 3 to 5 landing page variant total. And the reason for that being, 3 to 5 gives us the ability to be a bit flexible and include multiple different variants involved, right? But something such as 10 variants, right? It wouldn't necessarily just be, one versus, my A variant testing against my B variant versus my C variant. It would be my A variant versus my B, my C, my D, E, F, G, all the way down to the end, right? So it requires more data points for smart traffic before it can fully optimize from there. Question from the chat. Is there a situation in which customer would prefer to use A/B testing instead of smart traffic, which is great, and it's exactly where I was going to go next. Right, we do still see that there is value in having A/B testing, right? We wouldn't get rid of that functionality within Unbounce if we didn't think it was necessary, right? It's definitely something that does still hold value. And we think it holds value on a much more macro level, right? So for example, like here are the items that I mentioned when you should be using A/B testing. And it would be more so if you have a high traffic volume, right? So you have the ability to kind of get multiple different data points coming in the door to be able to reach that level of confidence or statistical significance to say that this headline or whatever it may be works better than the other, right? You have a high ad budget, right? And conversely, right, you need to drive a lot of traffic to your page unless your SEO is incredible, right? Presumably you need to pay for a lot of ads to be able to get the traffic levels needed there, right? As I mentioned, desire to test only one variable. Right? If we think about something that works from a macro perspective, I think that one thing that comes to mind to me is if I have a click-through page, where is my CTA located, right? Like that could be something that you can kind of test with A/B testing that would kind of fall within that criteria. And then finally, as well, you have the time to monitor the page necessary, right? So you have the ability, you and your team have the bandwidth and you want the control to be able to manage the difference between A/B testing. Which, if we go back to the benefits of smart traffic, is actually one of the things you don't even need to worry about, right? So smart traffic, because it consistently sends customers to the landing page that's most likely to convert, right? You don't need to necessarily monitor deprecating your landing page variant that's doing not as good as the other, right? And that's a question I get from customers all the time, and I tell them they don't really need to actually worry about it, right? Smart traffic will naturally, if your A variant is working a lot better than your B variant across all the different variables that we saw, naturally your A variant is just going to fire out almost, if not all the time in comparison, right? So you can kind of just, like I mentioned there, just set it and forget it. Good question. So the question from the chat is, how large or small are the variations you would recommend to a page variant? A whole new page for just a keyword and a headline, or just a distinct redesign? When it comes to using smart traffic, you can actually be a bit more broad. And maybe, Nicholas, I know you mentioned to this as well when you were talking about how you use smart traffic. The broader you can kind of go with your changes, it's going to enable you to kind of see which different segments, once the decision is made and all the traffic volume comes through, you can then apply that criteria directly to that segments, as we'll see in a moment with behavior sets. Nicholas, I know you mentioned yourself that you kind of like create a higher volume of changes on your page when you use smart traffic. Maybe you want to speak to that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would certainly recommend testing both really broad changes, but also testing granular changes. For us, just based on the results that we've seen from smart traffic, whenever we do broader changes, so we're talking complete redesigns of like an entire page, complete copy edits to change the entire tone, usually that brings better results, but most likely, it's going to depend on your specific niche, your audience. So you could test both, but I would probably start with the broader changes when using smart traffic.
Awesome. And thank you very, very much for the question, Brandon. That's a good one. So next, I'm just going to jump in. Oh, sorry. And then how much volume does smart traffic need to work optimally? That's a very good question as well from David. In terms of the traffic volumes that you're looking for, I'll go through in a second how many it needs to be able to kind of get past what we're going to call that learning phase. Obviously, just it's one of those things where the more the better, right? Like the more traffic that you kind of start getting in, the bigger your sample size is, the better and more accurate it's going to be to continue to optimize. If we just bounce it for a second here, I'm just going to head out and show you how to set up smart traffic specifically within Unbounce, right? So let's say I've gone in and I've created my first landing page and I want to go through and create my variant. So I'm going to turn smart traffic on, right? And now I have the ability to add my variant. So I'm just going to duplicate my page to where I have two variants. I'm going to add it to my test using just the ellipses down here at the bottom. I'm going to call this my second variant. Right. And obviously, like we mentioned, we recommend that you can have 3 to 5. I'm just going to use 2 just for the time being now for the sake of time. Right. And then I can publish my pages. Right. As my page is published, right, traffic will begin to run to my landing pages. And you'll see that we have now entered the initial learning phase, right? So when smart traffic is in this learning phase, we need 30 visitors to each active variant when we do first start before we can reach the optimizing phase, which follows, right? So when we do get to that optimizing phase, Unbounce looks at the data that we've collected in that learning phase, right? So for example, Phil is an iPhone user based in Canada, right? Therefore, this new incoming person is also, and based on previous data, Phil is most likely to convert with this C variant, right? Therefore, we're going to send Phil to the C variant and then see if our hypothesis is true. If it is, then we're going to continue along with that trend. If not, then we're going to go back to the drawing board and try and identify some other trends that way as more volume comes in, right? So that's the benefit in that it kind of continues to learn that way. And the bigger your sample size grows, the more optimal it's going to be from that perspective. Yeah, if you have a follow-up question, feel free to drop it in the chat there, David. I hope that answered that for you. Perfect. So that's how you would set up your test within the landing page builder. You have your two variants there, and you would see your conversion counts and your visitor totals increase and the conversion rates to go along with it, right? But how do we kind of figure out which variable is impacting the, the level of traffic going to each variant, and which variant, and what are the splits looking like, right? So that's where Behaviour Sets comes in. And that's one of our new tools that we've included here within Unbounce, just recently released. Just give me a quick second here. Not sure what's going on. Not sure what's happening. Okay, I'm just gonna stop sharing quickly. There we go. Sorry about that. Okay, so just bouncing back in. So we have Behaviour Sets open here. And this is an example that I included from one of my customers currently using Smart Traffic, right? So they've had about 5,500 visitors to one of their pages, right? They've got 4 active variants. They inactivated their first A variants. So their active variants are B, C, D, and E, right? And of those 5,500 visitors, they've got over 1,000 conversions, which is great to see, right? They have a pretty high. We can see up here at the top, this little greening, arrow pointing upwards in the plus 184 means that 184 of these conversions were smart traffic driven, right? So they had passed that learning phase that we kind of spoke to. A customer came to their landing, or a visitor came to their landing page, smart traffic sent them to one of these 4 variants, which then led to a conversion accurately, right? Which increased their conversion rate by 22% higher than it would have been if they were just using a 24 by 24 by 24 by 24 split, right? So that's great to see this start. Obviously, this is what we want to work towards, right? Up here at the top, right, if you click, so initially we were on that overview page. If we click just on the reporting page, we can actually see the breakdown between iOS and not iOS, as well as if we go a level deeper, the United States and outside of the United States, right? So to start, we can see that there's a pretty big drop off in conversion rate between iOS customers and non-iOS customers, which does make sense in this instance. Like, it's a SaaS company. And so likely if you're going to convert, you're presumably working on your desktop at work, right? This could just be an information related item if they're opening on their iOS phone. But the nice thing that we can now point to as well is that we can actually see these statistics broken out for each of these specific variants, right? I can click these drop downs to open them up here, and I can see the different splits between this B, C, D, and E variant that we just saw on the previous page, right? And to even go a level deeper, we can go ahead with this, and we can click this little pop out here, which is this little table, and I can see actually the non-iOS customers outside of the United States numbers. And when I did that, I actually found a bit of something pretty interesting that I wanted to show you guys, right? So on the B variant, non-iOS, outside of the US specifically, 194 of the 645 visitors came from the United Kingdom, right? And they had a 21% conversion rate, which is much higher than the next highest country, which is Australia at 120, right? And if we look at Canada, for example, only 77 came from there, and they had an 11% conversion rate. Now, if we look conversely at the C variant, we can see that Canada has more than double to the next closest country with that C variant for the non-iOS customers, right? And they're converting at much, much higher at that 25%. So we can now conclude that smart traffic is saying that, or smart traffic is recognizing that this C variant is much, much stronger in Canada. And so whatever the variables that we've done on the C variant is something that we can use for future campaigns, right? And the same thing for the B variant, right? We can see in the United Kingdom, it's only got sent out 18 times because presumably the United Kingdom is doing very, very well with this B variant, and we're going to send that one more often, right? So we can now go back as marketers, look at the differences between the two pages. And if we want to think about future campaigns, we can kind of build those out accordingly. Which is why as well too, we recommend making those major changes kind of at the beginning, because we can accumulate that data, right? One thing I quickly want to be able to point out too, is that if you do republish your pages, so if you were to go in to the Canadian one, make a whole bunch of changes, right? Any republishing will reset your behavior stats. So think about it from the timeline of, these are the changes that you want to make, and you can run them for a certain period of time, and then hierarchically save these stats somewhere, archive them somewhere, so your own well-being, and kind of take your notes from there. So that's essentially where I wanted to go with this. And we think that behavior sets is something that we're going to continue to evolve, and be able to kind of give you guys the data back from smart traffic that way. I don't see any additional questions coming through, but like I said, we'll have that Q&A at the end. So if you want to be able to jump in, then feel free. And then finally, we're just going to go through finally, there's one case study I did want to show you guys quickly. You can find this on unbounce.com. You can also check in our new Unbounce community if you guys want to take a peek at some different questions that have come up about smart traffic in the past, or different case studies and customer stories as well. These two are two completely different use cases in completely different industries, right? So for example, we have Dooley, who's a SaaS platform based here in Canada. They were trying to promote their own specific partnership program, right, where they receive 20% referral fees for any incoming customers looking to use their product, which is for note taking to your CRM platform, right? So the first one, what they did was they kind of spoke to the financial benefit and saying, you can refer and earn 20% forever, right? While on the B variant, they kind of played to that more like, emotional tone, such as, save your friends from CRM suffering, right? And they were able to kind of pull away some different understandings and resources from there. And then conversely, we had Construct Connect, which is a construction building company or project related company or project management related company, right? And they kind of went a bit more of that traditional route when we think about testing, right? We think about, what does our headline say? What does the color of our, we can change the color of the background image that we have, right, in our hero section, right? And they even combine these two together, right? So they might have, put together the blue background, but then included in that orange headline, right? So they kind of consolidated and learned from there as they went. So if you have any questions on these, feel free to go and use these resources that exist in our documentation page or on our Unbounce website. You can learn a bit about some different ideas for your testing. Or you can continue on and listen here to our good friend Adam, who's going to speak to a bit more of the in-depth strategies that he uses specifically when it comes to using landing page variants and how it leads more specifically to better business results, right? So this doesn't have to stay necessarily just on the landing page. It's even more so based on, the next steps before and after. So Adam, the floor is yours.
Oh, thank you. And great job, Phil. Can everyone see my screen? Should say efficient testing strategies for better business results. Cool. I'm going to stop my video since it looks like I am in a dungeon, even though I'm actually we work in Chicago. All right. So let's take a look at what we got going on here. Okay. So what I'm going to be doing and what I'm hoping you have by the end of my presentation is just how to actually get better business results from the strategies. So I want to start with a quote here from John Wanamaker, who founded Wanamaker's in the 1830s. So I spent a bunch of time in Philly. Wanamaker's is huge there. And I put this in because marketing, tracking marketing, and improving your marketing is not anything new. Here's the difference. We live in an age where not only should you know which half is working, you should also know why it isn't working, what you can do to improve upon it, and honestly, what to double down on. You honestly should be able to increase the efficiency on just data alone. And one of the biggest knocks that I get, because I do take over a bunch of accounts, is that internet marketing doesn't work. But I would argue that it does work, and using tools such as Unbounce, such as smart traffic, are how to massively increase efficiency. So in reality, you should know from your testing, not only what's driving conversions, which is what Nicholas, who actually is one of the people I took one of his courses from years ago, showed me how to do, but also how those conversions are making a business level impact. And I do want to take a moment to talk about what a conversion is. Now, I know there's a bunch of tech marketers, there's agencies, but this is really important because I'm going to be using this term a lot. A conversion is the business action you want to use it or take on your site. Could be submitting a form, could be an inbound call, certainly could be a purchase, but it has to have a business result. And of course, I'm going to start with a little bit of social proof to show you why I'm qualified to talk about the subject, because you guys don't know who I am. So what I'm not going to do is show you a bunch of blurred out clients that I can't talk about with screenshots about clicks that they get in, every month. Because honestly, I don't care about clicks. I only care about business results. So if I have one mantra and you take away nothing else from this, is you can't pay the rent in clicks. This is a verified case study from one of our clients, Kukeo Ula, the real estate agency out of Kauai. And like quite a few of our clients, they came to us and they said that they tried this before and it didn't work. Now I can tell you that not only did we change their campaign, their previous account wasn't using Unbounce. This is a nice Unbounce page. After applying our methodology, we were able to get them more leads in the first month than the past 6 months combined. Another verified case study from Bameda Smith, a family law firm out of Santa Barbara, California. Another Unbounce page. I put this in so you could see it. This works across a bunch of industries and verticals. We were able to triple the amount of leads they received from the previous marketing agency, which actually included both SEO and paid traffic. And again, we're talking about leads, we're talking about revenue, we're talking about return on investment, as far as you can go with these guys. And finally, a verified case study from our client Compass Real Estate, which is a huge real estate agency, another Unbounce page. And again, just to very quickly talk about business results, buyer and seller leads make a tremendous difference. So I'm going to show you how we were able to actually increase not only their buyer leads, which is just a conversion, a quantitative data point rather, to actually increase their seller leads, which is a qualitative data point. So here are the two ways to do this. I'm going to talk about business level impact and your offer for these two to test. Nicholas is going to show you how to put this in a prioritization matrix to actually show you how it does it. And we're going to try and do it live. I was actually telling these people offline, this always bombs on me. So let's see if we can actually make this work. So let's start by talking about business level impact. So there's a difference between business metrics and internet metrics. Internet metrics are things like clicks, cost per clicks, and honestly, conversions. When it comes to internet marketing, your North Star needs to be how much money is being made. And we always want to tie optimization efforts into money being made. The key here is understanding what the difference is between lead metrics, which are what I consider conversions, and lag metrics, which are business metrics like how much revenue are you driving, what's the return on ad spend, even things like average order value. So this is where a lot of marketing agencies fail, right? We all do the reporting, we talk about getting cheap clicks, talk about getting cheap conversions. Well, what's the actual best mechanism for turning a click into an actual sale? So I want to talk about quality versus quantity. So this is a back-end report that I provide for clients. And what this has is actually both the number of conversions. The client comes back and feeds the quality of those conversions, which I'm going to show you all how to do using Unbounce live. And we're going to test it. And so Google and Facebook only know that a conversion happens. It's just a pixel firing. I'm talking about leads here for this particular one. What they don't know is that this is a good match. This is a good lead or a bad lead. If you get a bunch of leads and they're junky leads, that's still going to feed into Google's algorithm, Facebook's algorithm, even LinkedIn, their algorithm, we'll call it. It's just going to feed it back and say you want more of these. So we want to show you how to actually take from Unbounce what works, do more of that, and do less of what doesn't work. And it's really a simple 3-step process. And like I said, we're going to go through this live. Hopefully this works. And if it doesn't, then I blame Nicholas. All right. So we have 3 steps here. We have the ad and ad platform. We're going to send the UTM parameters. We have Unbounce, which we are going to use a hidden form field and smart traffic. And then we're going to analyze this. Now what I'm showing you is just a simplified version in our CRM, our pretend CRM, which is going to be a spreadsheet. This works in Airtable, this works in Pipedrive, which is what I actually use. Certainly works in Copper, pretty much whatever you want to use in this. So the first thing you do is punch in UTM parameters. So UTM parameters are how you tell the network what works, what doesn't, how you tell the network to send what has happened. So in this case, you can see I have the campaign ID. This is a dynamic UTM parameter. We also have one for keywords. In Facebook, you'll have things like audiences and even ads. Then what you're going to do is in your Unbounce account, you are going to add a hidden field and add in parameters. So the user doesn't see these. I'm going to demonstrate this live again. So this is UTM term, which is what we would use in Google, and UTM campaign, which I actually recommend in any of them. Then you're going to port these in and do smart traffic. So this is going to be the exact live one. We have B and C. Then you're going to use a Zapier Zap, which is not in Unbounce natively, though it does connect quite natively and really easily, to pull this in to your reporting. Then you're going to analyze it and tell Google, hey, we want more of this. Tell Facebook, hey, we want less of this. Tell LinkedIn, hey, we want more of this. All of this is going to take your quantitative number of leads and make them qualitative. Let's try it live. All right. So what I've done here is actually done this for you. So if anyone wants to can do this, I have no problem with this. I'm not going to follow up with you with a bunch of leads. Go to ndib.org/UB. What that is going to do is create a UTM parameter. So in this case, we have the campaign is Unbounce and the UTM is going to be great _ marketing. I'm going to fill this out now. This is me. This is my email, my real email. And let's say the company website is, why not? Nerds do it better, right? Let's get this free consultation. What this does on the back end is it's going to push through this Zap here, which pulls in from Unbounce. I have this create the date just because I don't like how the date comes in. You can, of course, do this however you want. So Zap MetaHuman now is how you do it. And then it's going to push it to our little Unbounce webinar here. Now, what we can see from this is that the variant is B and that the keyword is great marketing. So if you have a bunch of keywords come in that are not good, you'd want to tell Google, we'd like less of those. If they are great, you'd want more of those. As an example, I showed you that divorce lawyer. We know that contested divorces are worth significantly more to the law firm than uncontested divorces, but some keywords are kind of a gray area. You don't know what works and you don't know what doesn't work exactly as far as if it is the correct keyword or not. And you need to tell Google, you need to tell Facebook, hey, this is what we want more of. This is what we want less of. I even pull in the submitter IP because I do have clients always asking, hey, where's this person from? And this will pull us in. This is native to Unbounce. And that is how you actually tell on the business level impact. Now you need to track these. I typically have my clients fill out good, poor, or unknown, but that's exactly how you pull in all of this information. And I guess I'll take questions on this at the end because I see that they are coming in. Okay. Now the next thing to talk about is the offer. And this is the other big important thing that I would talk about. I can see I'm running out of time. All right. So you need to match the offer with the stage that the user is at in the sales funnel, because this is actually one of the biggest changes you can make. So much more than, say, a headline or a color of a button, unless your button's actually hidden. So I like to break this down in a traditional funnel. So we have the top of the funnel, we have the mid funnel and bottom funnel. Top funnel is typically going to be your Facebook ads where they're not actually looking for you. Mid funnel can be retargeting ads. They can also be Google ads, and bottom funnel is almost always going to be your Google ads where people are directly looking for you. Top funnel, you want value add. Mid funnel, you want results. And bottom funnel, that's where your core or business offer is going to be. So here's just an example. This is exactly what I told you I would show you from Compass Real Estate. So we started with this very top funnel. This was obviously a couple years ago because no one's getting a property under $750K in San Diego. This got the buyer, a certain percentage of them then sold their house, and then we didn't upsell. Now this works because people weren't just going to say, hey, I want a real estate agent on Facebook. It just doesn't happen. That's a very unlikely situation. This worked tremendously well. You saw that quote. This is an example of a mid-funnel ad. This was a quiz. And at the end of the quiz, Doggy Dan, one of my favorite clients, is where you would be able to sign up for his paid program. And then this is just a straight out conversion. This is for people looking for coronavirus tests. I always put the caveat in, yes, it's not hard to sell coronavirus tests in time of coronavirus, but you do have to be some really big companies. I mean, we took on companies like Color, which is actually Google funded, Renegade.bio. Highly recommend them just as a service as well. They do good things in the world. Oh, I'm not going to have time for this. But if you do want to check out what I would have told you about here is there's an article in Search Engine Journal about it. So those are the two ways that I would recommend really doing this. That because there are a lot of agencies here, I will tell you this has reduced my churn tremendously, because when you can show how you've paid for yourself and that you're impacting business level impact, People don't leave you. If you want to have a consult, we can talk about it. And now I will pass it over to Nicholas, and that is the fastest I've ever done anything. I'm a notorious over-explainer.
Thank you, Adam. That was awesome. So many good points there. So I'm going to share my screen real quick, and we're basically going to take all of the ideas that you've been learning, and I'm going to show you how to prioritize them. So let me share my screen. Can everyone see it? You should see prioritizing your testing ideas and smart traffic tactics for optimal results. Awesome. So, okay, so the basic idea here is that you have all of these different concepts that you've been learning that you want to test, but a lot of times we're left with this idea of, I have all these test ideas, but how do I actually run the test? How do I run enough tests? How do I run the tests that I want to run when there's only so much time in the day and there's only so much traffic to allocate and things like that? And so typically the traditional answer has been, well, I'm going to run an A/B test, a standard A/B test that Phil outlined, how that works. I think we're all pretty much familiar at this point with A/B testing because it's been around for a long time. And so that's sort of the old standby A/B testing. And not to reiterate exactly what Phil said, because he did a great job explaining what A/B testing is. But the idea here is that with A/B testing, traditional A/B testing, you want to try to figure out what variant performs better. Typically, you'll have two variants, A and B. Sometimes you'll have more than that, but it requires a decent amount of traffic. It usually requires quite a bit of traffic, especially if you want to get results that are statistically significant within a reasonable time frame. And you also want to try to isolate for a single variable, like a headline. Like in this example here, you can see this is for one of our newsletters. You can see that the only change on this page is the headline in blue. And you can see the different conversion percentages here, but that's the only thing we changed. That's a traditional A/B test. Now, the problem with A/B testing is that it's slow and it's random. Now, we still use it, so I'm not totally anti-A/B testing, but I think there's definitely a lot of opportunity with what Unbounce has created with smart traffic. And so we, at this point, use smart traffic more than we use traditional A/B testing. So yeah, this is just to sort of give you that idea of what it's like to run an A/B test. If anyone's run a lot of A/B tests, you know how slow it can be trying to wait for results, and you never get to that statistical significance. So we needed something faster. We needed something better. There has to be a better way. And so that's the promise of smart traffic, because it tries to solve these problems. And the idea is you load in 3 or more variants. I usually like to do about 4 variants at a time. And then you sort of let the machine learning algorithm decide what happens next. You let it take over and make those decisions for you, as Phil outlined with the earlier part of the presentation with how it actually works. But here's the question is, you still have to figure out what do I want to test? Let's say you have 10 test ideas, or with what Adam presented, you could easily have probably dozens of test ideas. There's so many good things there, especially if you start thinking about business level metrics and things that really impact the business instead of simple things like button colors or should I just change the headline? So you can have all these ideas. And so you still have to figure out a way of prioritizing it or reducing that list down to a manageable number. Even with smart traffic, if you have 20 test ideas, what are the 4 best test ideas that I should run with a smart traffic campaign? And so that's where prioritization comes in. So the idea is to prioritize what test or tests you should run next. Now, there's a lot of prioritization frameworks out there. Some of you may have heard of something called the ICE framework, which Sean Ellis over at Growth Hackers made famous. There's the PXL framework, there's PI, there's a whole bunch of them. We actually created one at our agency, Earnworthy, and it's called the Dive Experimentation Framework. And you don't have to use this one, but it's worked really well for us. And so I wanted to share it with you today. So this is the basic overview of the process. And I'll go through the different sections of this PDF. And if you want to get access to this PDF, you can get access by going to growthmarketer.co/dive. You don't have to put in your email address, nothing like that. You can just click the button and get the PDF. There's also a Google Sheet that we're going to work through that complements the Dive experimentation framework very well. So you can get all that at that URL. Okay, so let's go through it real quick. And keep in mind, this is usually something that I would teach in like a 1 hour or 2 hour workshop. So I am going through it pretty quickly, but hopefully at the end, we'll take some questions and answer anything that I left out. But I wanted to give you a broad overview here of how to create this prioritization framework. So the steps are, number one, you'd come up with experimentation ideas. I think Adam gave you some really good ammunition to work with in how to come up with experimentation ideas and what parts of the business to focus on. So let's assume you have some ideas. Next, you need to give each idea a category and a description. What type of idea or what type of experiment would it be, and what is it about? Give it a little bit more of a description. And then step 3 would be to create a hypothesis statement for each one. Going back to our college years or high school, you probably remember there's a whole process for coming up with a hypothesis. I'll give you a template in a minute for a simple hypothesis statement that you can create with your within the framework. And then step 4 is to calculate the dive priority score. And I'm going to break that down, but basically there's 4 different things that you need to assign a numeric value to. And then that's going to help you decide, okay, this test is more important than this test or less important than this test. And it'll make more sense once you see it on the spreadsheet in a few minutes. And then step 5 is to run the tests in priority order. Now, if you were doing this with traditional A/B testing, this is where you literally have to pick just whatever your top highest priority test is and run that test against what we would call the champion page, right? The original page that is the one that you're running the test against, right? Because you have the champion page and then you have the challenger, which is trying to beat the champion page. But with Smart Traffic, you don't have to do that. You can put your top 2 or 3 challenger pages in play with that original champion page and run them all together. So that's the really cool thing that I like about Smart Traffic. And then step 6 is to record the outcome of each test. Even if the test is not a winner or if it's inconclusive, it's still important to learn from it and to record what happened with that test. So speaking of hypothesis or hypotheses, this is a simple framework you can use for creating a hypothesis statement. If blank, then blank, because blank. So to give you a quick example, let's use dynamic text replacement as an example, because that's another one of my favorite Unbounce features. If you're not using dynamic text replacement, Google Unbounce dynamic text replacement and start using it, because it can be very powerful, especially for Google Ads campaigns. But the idea here is, let's say that we want to run a test, or we have an idea for a test where if we use dynamic text replacement in a headline, that's going to increase conversions. So because the search query, they'll have more of a message match between what someone is searching on Google and what they're seeing on our Unbounce page. So the hypothesis for this would be, if I utilize dynamic text replacement in the headline, then conversions will increase because the page will be more relevant to the search query. You don't have to overthink this stuff. It can be very simple. There's a lot of hypotheses, processes that are a lot more complicated than this, but you really don't need to complicate it. Okay, moving on to the most important part of the experimentation framework is the priority score. How do you assign a numeric value to each test idea so that you know that this test is the most important one that you should run next? And so we've created 4 metrics that you basically multiply together. And that's where the acronym DIVE comes from. DIVE stands for data, impact, versatility, and efficiency. So I'll go through each one real quick. So data, what you're trying to answer is how much qualitative or quantitative data supports your hypothesis. So if this is just a random idea that you just came up with and you really have nothing to back it up with, then it's probably going to have a low data score. So everything you're ranking on a scale of 1 to 5, with 1 being negligible, 2 is low, 3 is moderate, 4 is high, and 5 is extreme. So if this is a test idea that you got because you already saw it work somewhere else, or you were speaking with customers and they told you about this, or you saw it using some type of behavioral analytics tool like Hotjar or Microsoft Clarity, then you have data to back it up and it would get a higher score. Moving on to the second value called impact. The question you're trying to answer here is, how much of an impact will this experiment have if it is successful? And so what you want to try to think about here is this something that's going to really move the needle? And I think this ties in perfectly with what Adam was talking about with business impact, right? You know, like he was talking about clicks versus revenue. So, you know, if you're running a test that's only meant to get you more clicks, but not necessarily get you more actual conversions or sales or leads, then that's probably going to have a lower impact, right? So you want to think about the business impact if the test is successful. Then with versatility, you want to try to answer the question of, if this is successful, how useful would these learnings be if we use them elsewhere in the organization? So an example here would be, let's say you wanted to run a test using dynamic text replacement in the headline of a landing page. Well, if you're spending a lot of money on Google Ads, then you know this is probably going to really help your Google Ads campaigns if you deploy dynamic text replacement, if it works. And so therefore, it's very versatile to be able to say, you know, if we can prove that dynamic text replacement works really well for this one Google Ads campaign, we could then roll it out to all of our campaigns, and that can have a huge opportunity cost, or it can have a huge impact in terms of being rolled out across the organization. And finally, with efficiency, you want to try to answer the question of what level of efficiency can we deploy the experiment with? So if it's easy to deploy, then it's extremely efficient. So it's a little, you have to sort of think about it for a minute there, but the higher the number, the easier it is to deploy this test. So again, going back to dynamic text replacement, that's a very easy test to run because you're just adding dynamic text to the headline of the Unbounce page, which takes a few minutes. You're changing a few URLs, you're updating some URLs in Google Ads. That's a simple test versus if you were to do, let's say, a custom multi-step form on an Unbounce page that's going to be fully built in JavaScript, right? That's going to take you more time. That's going to have a lower efficiency score because it's going to take more time to deploy that experiment. So then all you do is you multiply those different scores together. And to make it even easier, let me show you this spreadsheet that I created. And you can also access this at growthmarketer.co/dive. Hope everyone can see that. Let me see here. You see the spreadsheet. Awesome. So what you can do with this spreadsheet is not only will it help you prioritize all of what we just covered, because it's going to add up the results for you, but you can also keep track of your experiments. So for instance, I like to give every experiment a number. Even if we don't run the experiment, if it's just an idea, I would still give it a number. I give it a name. I give it a status. So if it's just an idea and we haven't actually run it yet, it's just an idea. Then I would create the hypothesis statement here. We actually have a space for a description as well if you want to go into a little more detail of what exactly you're going to be changing or modifying on the landing page. And then here's the important part. So let's say that for this dynamic text in the headline idea, let's just score it out real quick. So let's say that I'm basing this idea on the fact that I've seen this dynamic text replacement concept work really well for other campaigns. So I'm going to give it a 4 in terms of data. And you can also hover over these sections here if you forget how to think about each of these questions. For impact, how much of an impact will the experiment have if it's successful? Let's assume that we have a lot of budget going towards Google Ads. So therefore, this is going to have a huge impact if we can get that conversion lift up pretty significantly. Versatility, again, let's say that we have a lot of Google Ads campaigns. So if we could roll out dynamic text replacement across several campaigns, it's going to help us a lot. And then efficiency, this is an easy test to run. So I'm going to give it a 4. And so there you have the total. So imagine if you do this for 10 test ideas, eventually what you'll have here is a list of all those different ideas with the scores. And then you can take the top ideas and instead of just running one of them, you could put 3 or 4 of them into a smart traffic campaign, run it against your original page, and boom, you're now in business. You have great test ideas. You have a great way to think about and track the results. And then you can even come back here and you can document the start date, the end date, whether the test was a winner or a loser, experiment results. Some of this makes more sense with traditional A/B testing, so you don't necessarily have to fill out the outcome portion, but just to help you keep track of and prioritize your tests, hopefully you'll utilize this framework or at least one of the frameworks that are out there for prioritizing tests. So that's going to do it for my part of the presentation. And like I said, you can go to growthmarketer.co/drive or dive, DIVE, and you can get instant access to both the framework and the spreadsheet. So with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Phil.
Awesome. Thank you so much, gentlemen. That was extremely, extremely helpful. I could ask questions all day. We do have one really good one from the chat, and I think it kind of just goes back to just, landing page best practices and maybe some different like strategies that we use to design our pages for conversion or for conversion purposes. This one comes from Peter. Any chance you could clarify the ratio and the amount of copy/images that you generally use on these highly performing pages? What do you think, how important in terms of content when creating landing pages? And would you add longer content and a lot of images ever? And then he also goes on to say, most of my clients are retailers in the UK, Italy, or Germany. I was wondering if there's any ideal scenarios or any ideal amounts based on these geographical sectors. Maybe we can kind of take that into pieces, right? So I guess like when we think about landing pages, I guess, I don't know if either of you guys want to chime in on this. Like speaking mostly to copy and images or copying and images, like, are you guys more of like the less is more committee when it comes to using copy on your landing pages, or do you guys try to get more descriptive depending on the industry? Like, what do you guys like to do?
Yeah, so when it comes to like copy, well, first off, I just want to say, if you're doing UK, you have to be so serious about the GDPR. There's like no joking around about that. I used to live in England. I left my monocle there, but like they are really serious about the GDPR. So I always point that out because I've seen people blow it and you can get fined a lot. But when it comes to things like how much copy, how much images, my old job was I used to write for a newspaper, and my editor would always say, do as much as you need and no more, and then clarity over everything else. And that's what I've really found is like, it's not going to make a huge difference if you have 10 sentences versus 7. Honestly, what really will make a difference is, 1, do people understand what you're doing, what you're offering? And 2, is it something that they want based on where they are? Just like what I was saying with matching the offer with the network. So you can have like a 15 sentence, whatever, it doesn't matter. If the offer doesn't match where the user's at, you're sunk. So really always be thinking about the user. I actually used to have, before I was in like the WeWork dungeon, a big thing behind me that said, what's in it for me? Because that's what I think about with the user. What's in it for them? Get yourself out of it. Make it as easy for them as possible, as clear for them as possible. If you are wondering about clarity, there are a whole bunch of services out there. I don't get a cut of them anyway, but I know Winter is one that people have been using from Pepla, and like that's where I would start. So it's like, those people who eat like a giant cake and then drink a Diet Coke and like, do you think it's the Coke that's making me put on weight? No, it's probably the massive amount of calories that you just put in the first part. So really just focus on clarity and matching the offer, and you're golden.
Awesome. Nicholas, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, those are great points. The only things I'll add real quick is, 1, learn about a concept called a 5-second test. And there's a website called usabilityhub.com where you can have like real people run 5-second tests, or you can run a 5-second test and recruit people. It's just an amazing way to get a quick first impression. So that's a great tool for figuring out if you have clarity and if you have the right ratio of images versus text, like, go where the people are and get real data. And the second thing is, what I like to think about is copy sells and images and graphics support, right? So a dumb example would be, if I just showed you a picture of a red Lamborghini and there's no copy, you're going to say, what the heck is this? But if I showed you a page and all it had on it was a headline with no images, and it said, enter your email for a chance to win a red Lamborghini, what are you going to act on more? Of course, you're going to act on the page that has the copy, not the image. So that's just a good example of copy sells and images support. So I would always try to go more all in on the copy first, and then create imagery around that supports the copy.
Awesome. Super, super helpful on that. Yeah. And I always say too, like, so we do have, I can share this in the chat right now. We also have our conversion benchmark report, which is a super useful tool, because what it does is it takes a lot of the information that we have from our customers, and we can just take some of the text that we see from their landing pages. And sometimes we can often see themes such as like anticipation and joy, or fear and, trust, like some of these different, words that are associated with these feelings and emotions, and how those work towards conversion rates, right? So oftentimes you know, something super emotional might not affect a SaaS product the same way it would an e-commerce product where you're trying to, sell this, healthy good, right? Like you're trying to think about the quality of the copy and what you're saying. So that's definitely something that I would recommend adding into. Peter is kind of even thinking about kind of like thinking of it from an industry perspective of who your customer is from that side of things. And then I would just say too, like we do have a couple more minutes. I have one last question too for you guys, and just this super broad, like when it comes to landing pages, what do you think is like the biggest problem that you guys do see that some clients, when they come to you guys nowadays, like what's the first thing that you look for that you think that they're probably doing wrong, or you see very commonly popping up?
I see the biggest problem is a lack of strategy. Like I said, I take over quite a few divorce lawyer campaigns. They're one of my biggest verticals. And they're running these get a consult ads on Facebook, and you can't really target them correctly. So if you're talking about like, no one's going to go on Facebook and be like, hey, I'm thinking of getting a DUI today. Like that's never going to happen in a million bazillion years. But they will actively go and say on Google, wet and reckless consult for, especially for California, or DUI or OUI, depending on where they're at. So I will match that offer with that place. So if you are offering like the wrong offer, what you're doing on your landing page isn't going to make all that big a difference. But one of the things that I find so awesome about Unbounce, and this is another company I don't get a cut of, but I think that they're awesome, and I always say this, is you can test your offers so rapidly. So let's say you have, 3 ebooks. I mean, how long is that actually going to take to do 3 different landing pages? Probably just a headline and then flip the image. Maybe your one ebook just stinks, but then you have another one, which is actively what the person wants. Well, then your headline isn't going to make all difference, but the way you rapidly test that's going to make a huge difference. And in fact, it does make a huge difference. I put that offer, the one that I did with Cloud Medical, we doubled their membership. And that was just simply, we added one extra step where we gave out an ebook. It probably took me, an hour to make the page. Just rapidly testing, rapidly deploying, getting real world data, because what people tell you they'll buy versus what they actually buy is so different.
Love that. Nicholas?
Yeah, absolutely. I normally say the same thing, like, the offer is the most important part of a page. So I'll tell you my second favorite tip, or the thing I see happen most often with landing pages that are not performing well, is the usability of the page. There's something messed up with it. And I can't tell you how many times I'll get on a call and the client will just obsess over the desktop view, right? And then you look at the data and most of their traffic, 80 or 90% of traffic is mobile. So you really have to change the way you think about landing pages. Most people, if you're running paid traffic, most people are accessing that page from a mobile device, which gives you a much smaller canvas to work with. It's harder to get conversions on mobile, but that's where you need to spend your time. So you need to go through all of the steps to make sure you have amazing usability, both with how the page displays, how quickly it loads, and really importantly, how easy it is to interact with the page, especially with forms, with buttons. If you have a click to call button for a phone number, pay a lot of attention to usability, especially on mobile.
Awesome. Really appreciate that, guys. That was incredible. I think that we can definitely talk through this all day if we really wanted to. I wish we had another hour to go through all these different examples to gain some conversions for our customers. Super quickly, I just wanted to mention that part of our webinar series, we do have another one coming up. We do have our monthly Apps for All webinar hosted by my colleague Joel, who is our technology partnership program technology partnership program manager, sorry. And he'll be going through all the apps that we have currently in Smart Builder, just same with you, Shopify, Stripe, Calendly, Typeform, a lot of external and design related products too that you can use within the builder too, which is great to see. The next one is next Wednesday, June the 8th. And you can sign up in the new Unbounce community. So definitely go on and check that out. And with that, if you have any additional questions, feel free to reach out. You can reach out to myself, or you can reach out to Alejandra, who is our agency partnership program manager. You can definitely reach out to her at just agency@unbounce.com. So with that, thank you so much, everyone, for joining today. And a big special thank you again to Nicholas and to Adam. You guys are incredible. Great working with you both. And hopefully we get to do this again sometime in the future.
Thanks.
Thanks everyone.
Beautiful.
Bye.
Take care, team.